Hi there, I'm Eitan, and welcome back to Wix Wiz. If you're here today, I'm going to assume that you've heard about the newest Wix update, where they will be depreciating the Ascend plans and replacing them with email marketing plans. And these email marketing plans are much more restrictive than the previous email allowance that you had with your regular Wix plan, which is causing a lot of people to search outside of Wix for different emailing solutions. One of those most popular solutions that people are turning to is Mailchimp. And today I will be showing you how to integrate Mailchimp with your Wix website so that when you create a contact, for example, using a contact form on your Wix website, the contact will be added automatically both to your Wix list of contacts and to your Mailchimp list of contacts. Then you can use Mailchimp to send out your mailing campaigns as you would have done with Wix. So if you're interested in that, let's get started. Okay, so the prerequisites for this demonstration will be that you have a website with some sort of Wix form. It can be one of the pre-made Wix forms, or it can be a custom-built Wix form. The important thing is that it is a form that adds whoever fills it out as a contact to your website using either the Wix Forms automations or a custom functionality that you build out with Velo. Both will work. And the second thing that I recommend is having the Mailchimp API documentation open. We're going to be using this marketing API Quickstart guide. And last but not least, you will need to have a Mailchimp account. I kind of skipped through that part because I didn't want to bore you with the onboarding wizard of Mailchimp, but it's simple and it's free, assuming that you want to start out with the free tier. And once you have these three things, we can get started. So I'm going to start right over here with the Marketing API Quick Start Guide. And after we've created our Mailchimp account, the next thing we're going to want to do is generate our API key. So I'm going to go right over here to the API keys section of the Mailchimp account, and it's really convenient because they've kind of linked it all up. So you don't need to go around looking for anything. You can just follow the quick guide. Then I'm going to scroll down over here to my API keys, and I don't have any active API keys at the moment, so I can just click here and create a key. This might take a moment, and my new API key is ready for use. And this is my key right over here. So I am going to go ahead and I want to copy this key. Let's see how I would do that. Okay, I think I copied the API key. I'm not so sure. And I'm going to go over here to my website and just head over to my dashboard. And that is because we are going to be storing this API key within the secrets manager. I'm not going to go much in depth about why we are storing this in the secrets manager. If this is your first time integrating with an external API, I highly recommend checking out my extensive tutorial about external APIs in Wix, and I go more in depth there about secrets manager and other things related to working with APIs. So I'm going to go over here and click Store Secret. I'm going to call this Mailchimp API key. You can call it whatever you like. Just make sure to remember what this name is. And I'm going to go ahead and paste the value right in there. I always like to check the value and make sure that I don't accidentally have any unwanted spaces or anything like that, because that can really ruin it. And I'm going to go ahead and click Save. Now that my API key is stored, we can head back to the guide and see what we need to do next. After we have generated the API key, we need to install the client library for our language. So since we're going to be using the Wix backend for this, the client library we're going to need is the Node.js library, okay, which is JavaScript. And here we see that we need to npm install Mailchimp /Mailchimp marketing. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. This is the name of the package. And then when I go over here to our website, I'm going to, of course, need to turn on dev mode. If you haven't turned on dev mode yet, this is the time to do it. And then head to public and backend. Sorry, not public and backend yet, but first packages and apps. And we are going to install this npm package for Mailchimp. So I'm just going to paste the name of the package right over here and see if we can find it. And here it is. So at Mailchimp/Mailchimp marketing, and I'm going to go ahead and click install. And we're going to wait one moment for that to install, and great. So that is installed, and now we can move ahead to the next step of the guide. So after we've installed the client library for the language, we are going to make our first API call. And this is just going to test that we have our API set up correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this code here that they set up to do this test. And I'm going to head back over to the Wix website, go to backend, add a new web module and call it Mailchimp. And just erase everything that comes with it right over here. Now I'm just going to zoom right in so you can see what I'm doing a little better. And I'm going to create export function test Mailchimp. And the reason I'm exporting it is, so I did export function, so I don't need to have this right over here like this. There we go, a function. And I'm going to paste the code that we got from Mailchimp right over here. I'm going to move this line, which is requiring Mailchimp, outside of the function. And this is because, if we were to have more functions in this file that are all using this Mailchimp package, then it wouldn't really make sense to require it within a function. It makes more sense to require it at top level. And now we are going to need to replace this API key. I'll zoom in. No, that's good. We're all zoomed in. And in order to do that, we are going to need to import get secret from Wix secrets backend. And then we can say that const API key is equal to await get secret. And here we're going to want to put the name of our secret. If you don't remember, then you can just go back to your secrets manager and copy this name right over here and put that right over there. And the reason that we have await here throwing an error is that this needs to be an asynchronous function. So I'm going to export this as an async function, and then we're all good. And now this should be our API key. So we just can write here API key, or a shorter way to do this would just to be erase this completely. And this is the equivalent of API key is API key. And in terms of server, let's see what we have here in the guide. To find the value for the server parameter, use mailchimp.setConfig. Used in mailchimp.setConfig, log into your Mailchimp account and look at the URL in your browser. The US 19 part is the surface. Okay, so let's go over here, and you can see here that in my account, I am US 21. You might be something else, so you'll have to check your own account and see which server you are using. And then we're just going to head right over here and put our server prefix as a string, I'm assuming. If we throw an error, then I assumed wrong. So let's go ahead and test this out. So I'm going to go ahead here and click run. And it returned with undefined. And inside our console.log, we got a health status. Everything is chimpy. Okay, we could have also just returned this response. Console.log response, I could have done return response and then tested it again. And then the function would have returned with should have returned with everything chimpy. Oh, because this is another function. Okay, inside of that. Anyways, if it's important to you to get this response as returned from the function, which is not so important for us at the moment, then you can refactor this code. But the important part is that we got back the everything chimpy response, and that means that we're good to go. So our ping worked, health status, everything's chimpy. Now, the next thing that we're going to want to do is to create our first audience and add new contacts, okay? Because our goal here is to automatically add contacts that fill out any kind of form on our website, or basically anytime we add a contact to our Wix website, we are going to want to add them directly to our Mailchimp mailing list. So let's go over here to the guide for creating your first audience. So here in this Create Your First Audience guide, they start by showing you how to create an audience. We are going to have a problem with this because we are currently using the free version of Mailchimp, which only allows one audience. This isn't a really big deal because anyways, I've seen in some of their other documentation that Mailchimp is kind of leaning towards keeping one audience and recommending segmentation instead. But either way, even if you wanted to create another audience, you cannot using the free version. And so we're going to skip through the create an audience guide and head straight to adding a contact to an existing audience. And in order to do that, if we take a look down here at the code, we'll see that one of the things that we're going to need is the list ID. And this is a good chance to note that list and audience mean the same thing to Mailchimp here in the documentation, and the same goes for contact and member. So you can see here that we're adding a contact to an audience, but the function that we're using is add list member. So those two sets of terms are interchangeable. So let's start by finding our list ID or our audience ID. And I'm going to do that by going to my Mailchimp account and going here to audience and going to all contacts. Once I'm on the all contacts page, I can go over to settings, audience name and defaults. And then right over here, we have our audience ID. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this audience ID without the period, of course. So just from 5 to 8 over here, and copy it over to our Wix site and store it here in a constant. So I'm going to say const audience ID, and that will be equal to a string that I just copied over. Now we can go ahead and get the boilerplate code that we got from Mailchimp. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this right over here and head back to our Wix site. And I'm going to put this inside of a new function. I'm going to call this function create contact. And this will just be a regular function. And I'm just going to paste the code that we copied over right in here. Now we need to change a few things over here. So first, we're going to change our list ID to be the audience ID that we stored. And in terms of our subscribing users, so from some testing that I did earlier, I found that if you use the default email that they put over here, it doesn't work. And I'm guessing that's because it's at example.com and maybe they have some kind of spam prevention or some kind of error prevention algorithms in there that will kind of see what the email is here and if it makes sense. I'm just going to change it to something like my first contact at gmail.com. And I think that that should work. If this doesn't work for you though, then just your issue is probably over here with the email. So maybe use your own email when you're testing, just something that you know is a valid email. And that should pretty much be it. It is interesting to note here that we don't need the API key. So you can see here that we're not configuring the API key in the server here in the create contact function. So essentially our list ID is the only thing that's preventing people from kind of abusing this and uploading contacts to our audience in our account. So you might want to also store this list ID as a secret, even though it seems that it's not treated with the same respect as an API key, at least from the Mailchimp perspective. I'm not sure what their philosophy here is on this, but it's an interesting thing to note. I'm just going to go ahead and format the code, make sure we're all in order, and let's test out our create contact function. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to hit run. And wait patiently. Okay, so I see that my contact was not created. So let's go ahead here back to the Mailchimp function. And I'm going to try a different email address. So let me try aton1@gmail.com and try that out. So let's go back to create contact, run that one more time. Okay, so it's still not working. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do some refactoring for the code. So instead of running this in a separate function, I'm just going to run it in our original function. So I'm going to get rid of this. And that. And make sure that here we are in an async function. So I'm going to export an async function and format the code. One more thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this part of the code inside of a try catch, and that should basically catch any errors that we're having with this API call. And so if we still encounter problems after this, then we can debug. And just console.log error, and copy this code right over here into our try. So this is similar to .then catch, if you're familiar with that. This is just how we handle it in the case of async await. Just going to do some cleanup here because it's kind of annoying me how they set up the code over here. That's just a personal thing. Excellent format. And let's give it another whirl. So I'm going to go back here to create contact and click run. Okay, so invalid server api.mailchimp.com. Okay, so this is indicating that we did need to pass in the API and server information, even though inside of the documentation it doesn't indicate that that needs to be done, maybe because they're assuming that we are doing this right after the create audience. And they have the config set up right up here. So let's try going ahead and grabbing our config over here and putting it right here at the top of our create contact function. Sorry about that. And I'm going to trash that. And we successfully added our member. So you can go ahead and forget what I said earlier about not needing the API key over here. That's not true. And this makes a lot more sense. So I'm less surprised with Mailchimp now than I was earlier. And you can see here that I've added a contact and the contact ID is as such. And if we go over here to our audience, go take a look at all of our contacts, then we should see the new contact that we added right over here. Okay, so that means that we are more than 50% there. So we have the automatic, we have a function, that's adding contacts to our contact list here on Mailchimp. And now we just need to create the automation part so that whenever a new contact is added to our website, it adds it to this list. And the way we're going to do that is using the Contacts API. And if you take a look here at the Contacts API for Wix, then you can see that we have something called events. So that's right over here. And one of the events that we have is on contact created. And we're basically going to use this event to automatically generate our contacts in Mailchimp. And the way that events work is basically it is that whenever a contact is created, this event fires in the background in the back end of your website. And if you expose this function within the events.js file on your Wix website, then you can do different cool stuff. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy this code. And then I'm going to go to our website, go to our public backend, and here you're going to want to click plus and say add data hooks. Not true. Handle backend events. Sorry, my bad. And this is going to automatically create a events.js file in your backend. And here is where we are going to just get rid of all the code here and paste the code that we copied from our create contact API, Velo API. And you can see here that it shows us some examples of data that we can extract from this event. So we have the contact ID, which is event.metadata.entityID. And here we have contact name. So here they're putting the first and last name together. We're actually going to want to separate that because those are two separate things that we're going to want to send over to the Mailchimp API. And we're also going to need the email. And here you can see the full event object that comes back and how we can extract different things from it, such as, let's see if the email is over here anywhere. That's interesting. I don't see the email address here for the contact. Let's see, info name. Did they just choose not to put it here, or is it not possible? Let's take a look. On contact, event, entity, and details about the contact source. Here. Primary info, and then we have email. Okay, so this should be possible. I don't know why they didn't show it here in the example object, but we'll find it. Okay, so let's set up the data points that we want to collect here. So we are going to want, first we are going to want first name, we're going to want last name, and we are going to want email. So for first name, we already have that, so we just need entity. So we need event.entity.firstname. And then for last name, it's the same thing. Entity.info, info.name.firstname. First. And then here we're going to do the same thing and just last. And you saw here that they were using these question marks. That basically adds a condition that, only if this exists do we pass it on. Based on what we're doing now without the question marks, it should just pass undefined. What I'm going to do here is say, it's going to go like this. So that means that if it doesn't exist, it'll just pass an empty string. And for the email, for the email. So let's take a look here at where the email was stationed. So we have the event, we have the entity. Within entity, make sure this is, within entity, we have primary info. So we have event dot entity dot info dot primary info dot email. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to add a console here. I'm going to console first name, last name, email, in case we run into problems in the future. And then hopefully this will help us identify any issues we have in the backend logs. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to call our create contact function. So in order to make this function work, I'm going to head back here to our Mailchimp. And here inside of the parameters, I'm going to have here first name, last name, and email. And then over here, instead of passing in strings for the subscribing user, we are just going to pass in our parameters. And remember, when you pass in a variable like this, it basically is the same thing as first name, first name. Okay, so this is the same thing as this. And obviously this is going to be equal to whatever we pass in here as the parameters for our function. So let's go ahead here to events.js. I'm going to rename this Mailchimp contact just to differentiate between contacts on Wix and contacts on Mailchimp. And head back to our events.js file and import this function from backend/Mailchimp and call it over here. So I'm going to say create Mailchimp contact, first name, last name, email. Excellent. Now, if we go ahead to our site, and now we can use our handy dandy contact form that we set up here. I'm going to go back, before I run this, I'm just going to go to our logs, and I'm going to clear our logs just so that they're nice and clear. This is here in the developer tools. That we will be able to see if we have any errors popping up here in the backend functions. And I'm going to go and preview. So let's add tester1. Tester1. Last name will be tester1. Email will be tester1@gmail.com. And I'm not going to leave a message here. I'm just going to go ahead and submit this contact form. So technically now a contact named tester1 was supposed to have been added to my Wix contacts. So let's go over here to logs. I don't see anything here going on with the logs. Let's check out our contacts over here and make sure that a contact was actually added. Okay, so I don't see a contact added here. So technically nothing happened. Nothing was wrong with the code that we wrote. There's just something that's not working with our form on the Wix website. So if we go over here to contact us, I'm going to head back to the editor. And what I'm going to try first is to do this on the published website. I think this, I'm guessing maybe there's some issue with doing this in preview mode. So I'm going to go ahead and publish. And let's check out our live site. So let's try this again. I'm going to say tester1, tester1, and tester1@gmail.com and submit. Okay, let's take a look now over here. I'm going to go ahead to contacts, and we have a new contact tester1, so that is working. Unfortunately, I wasn't in the logs, so we won't be able to see the logs, but let's go and see if we have a new contact here in Mailchimp. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh our contact list. And we can see here, tester1@gmail.com. Okay, so we had someone visit our Wix website, fill out a form, and automatically we have the contact now here in Mailchimp. So if you so far are liking this tutorial, this would be a great time to hit that subscribe button and hit a like button. If you have any more things related to Mailchimp that you would want to see, then please write that in the comments below. A few more notes that I want to add about this Mailchimp integration. This is obviously just the first step. The Mailchimp integration the Mailchimp API has lots of stuff that you can do, from automations, campaigns, everything that you can do with Mailchimp, pretty much you can access through the Mailchimp API, and those are things that you can also integrate slowly with your Wix website if you choose to do so. Another thing to note, specifically in the topic of creating contacts, so in both Mailchimp and our Wix website, we were dealing with the situation where we have a new contact, but as you can see here in their notes, that if you're not sure whether a contact has already been added to the audience or not, then you should use the add or update list member endpoint. So if you go over here to their documentation, you'll be able to see specifically how to merge fields, and this is a slightly more advanced usage, so it's a little more complicated to implement, but you can use the principles that we use today in order to do so. And the same goes for Wix, that if you think that you may also be dealing with contacts that are being updated or contacts that are being merged, then you will need to address these event handlers as well and make sure that you're adding or updating your Mailchimp contacts in all these situations. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and conclude our tutorial for today. Again, if you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.